we are going to become limited by power in our quest for digital superintelligence.
This is a structural issue we have in the US.
This is America's Achilles heel.
China is going all in on energy production, and it's epic. Meta is worth $1.8 trillion today. They got $70 billion in cash. These offers of $100 million or their acquisition offers on companies, it really is a winner-take-all mindset in this.
The natural dynamic is winner takes all because the AI becomes self-improving very, very soon.
The biggest threat to Meta is that they fall way behind on AI.
We're in the middle of probably the greatest drama in human history here, which is why everyone should be tracking these moves closely. These numbers are so unprecedented, but they're completely justifiable given the impact.
Now that's a moonshot, ladies and gentlemen.
Welcome to an episode of WTF on Moonshots. I'm here with my moonshot mates, Salim Ismail. Salim, I'm calling you the Emperor of Exponentials because that's just who you are.
Oh,
and
God.
Dave Blundin, the alchemist of AI. How's that for a title? You guys have
we need one for you, Peter.
All right, Peter, you have to be something epic. How about the humongous bungalungus of abundance?
Not sure I like that. I like what Dean Kamen said on stage. She called me the Pope of Hope.
The Pope of Hope. That's awesome.
Yeah, my mom liked that. She's watching all of my abundance videos and the whole show on stage, and she writes back, she goes, "Pope of Hope, I love that." Thank Dean for me.
All right.
We have a lot to cover today, and as always, our goal here is to deliver you the real news, the news that's going to impact you, the news that's changing every industry, every family, every country, right here, right now. So rather than watching the 6 o'clock news, join us on this epic mission to deliver, a compelling, hopeful and abundant future. All right, buddy.
Here we go.
Buddies, let's jump in. So let's talk about all things AI. Another epic week. Every week is just accelerating. It feels that way. Let's kick it off with this conversation. This is from Elon, and I'll just read his tweet. He says, basically, we will use Grok 3.5. Maybe we should be calling it Grok 4, which has advanced reasoning to rewrite the entire corpus of human knowledge, adding missing information and deleting errors, and then retraining on that new corpus. So first of all, we've got this name escalation, right? So we're going to GPT-5 and then Gemini 2.5 through soon Gemini 3. I think Elon feels behind on Grok 3.5.
Numerical warfare, yeah.
Dave, what do you think about this idea of retraining Grok 3.5 on a new corpus corrected by AI and getting rid of human errors?
Yeah, that specific idea is actually low-hanging fruit and a real big win. But it's one of many big wins. I mean, the rate of change of what we've seen in the models in the last 2 weeks since last time we talked is just mind-boggling. And an experience everyone needs to have is if you pick up either Gemini 2.5 Pro or GPT-4 voice mode and just talk to it as you're driving in a car for like an hour or 2 hours. That's something you couldn't do a month ago. And now you can do it, and it's engaging. And if you draw a line between a month ago and today, and you look a month into the future, it's going to replace a lot of what you do in terms of media. It's just so incredibly engaging all of a sudden. So I think what Elon's talking about here is, look, the training data, believe it or not, the actual original training data for these models had a Reddit subreddit in it that's called Microwave. And the Microwave subreddit has a series of M's, just goes, for thousands and thousands of lines. And then at the end, it goes beep. So that gets scraped and gets thrown into the training data.
A lot of crap.
Okay, there's a lot of crap. And I think, Elon might actually be referring to a lot of his own tweets with Donald Trump here. Okay, well, if we get rid of that crap, then the neural net has a much easier time learning what really matters. So this is part of a long list of low-hanging fruit that's right in front of these training algorithms. So you're going to see really rapid improvement just from the obvious, including this.
Salim, what could possibly go wrong if AI rewrites the corpus of human knowledge?
I've been watching a few videos of Yuval Harari talk about, oh my God, AI can now program itself and program things. And he's going to go nuts on this type of concept where if you can edit history, right, where do you end up? Where do you draw the line? Who decides what's accurate or not?
In the beginning, there was AI, and it was good.
Exactly. God said, "Let there be AI," and then everything followed from there, right? This really will pose some huge philosophical challenges. Now, on the plus side, there are so many gaps. There's so many flawed narratives where history is written by the winners of all the epic battles and wars in the past, and therefore we can balance out that viewpoint a little bit and get a little bit more reality into it. That'd be great. But there's a very dangerous line here, and I think it's the right thing to do. It's going to cause a lot of consternation.
Yeah. So we're expecting Grok 3.5 any day now. It was promised in May, then delayed into early June. What is today? We're recording this on June 26th. So he said by the end of June. He's got 4 days left. But even if it's July, it's going to be epic. Can't wait to try and play with it. All right. I'm going to play this video also from Elon. And the subtext here is superintelligence may happen this year or by the end of next year. All right, let's listen.
I think we're quite close to digital superintelligence. It may happen this year. If it doesn't happen this year, next year for sure. The digital superintelligence defined as smarter than any human at anything.
So here we've got the issue of definition, right? What is AGI? What is digital superintelligence? Dave, you and I recorded an episode we'll be sharing shortly with Eric Schmidt, going deep into digital superintelligence. His prediction is a little bit more, I won't say pessimistic, but it's the next 5 years on his time frame. But what is it? Do you still have the confusion that I do when people are popping back and forth between AGI and ASI?
Yeah, because no one's really locked down a clear definition, but I think Elon gave a very, very clear definition in that presentation just for that reason. AI that can do anything better, any intellectual task better than any human. That's the hardcore definition, and he's saying by the end of next year, which is the soonest date that people are saying. But he's very close to the progress, so he has every reason to be right.
Yeah, no, I would not doubt his timeline. I actually went on to ChatGPT and Grok and asked them both for a definition of AGI versus ASI. Can I share that with you guys?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So ChatGPT says AGI is a machine capable of understanding, learning, and performing any intellectual task that a human can do across domains with reasoning, adaptability, and autonomy. And then it says ASI, this is ChatGPT, is an intelligence far surpassing the best human in every field, creating with creativity, problem-solving, decision-making. Grok says AGI is an AI capable of performing any intellectual task that a human can do with general problem-solving. And ASI is AI surpassing human intelligence in all intellectual tasks. Even these definitions sort of blur the line.
But I go on my classic hobby horse here because we have no idea what we're talking about when we talk about intelligence. And so I don't need to get into that trope again. But let me suggest this, right? The minute you can prescriptively, if you want to define something like this, you have to define what you mean by it. And the minute you can prescriptively describe a task, an AI or robot's going to be much better than you anyway. So the work that comes down to what's the task prescriptively. Saying that it'll be smarter than a human being, that's a different kind of a model. Here's where I'd like to see it do.
Please.
You have Kepler, a couple hundred years ago, one day making an intuitive leap that maybe the moon is affecting the tides, and makes a massive intuitive leap that then can be backed up with scientific and experimental evidence. That's the kind of thing that if AIs can do, then so you start tickling at the edges of what we mean by intelligence, because we have emotional intelligence, we have spiritual intelligence, etc. There's the end of my rant.
Well, I think that's going to happen. I mean, one of the predictions is we're going to start to see math, physics, chemistry, biology getting solved by these advanced AI models in the next 2 to 5 years. I mean, this is what our friend Alex Wiesner-Gross keeps on hitting on. We're going to solve math in the next 12 months.
Yeah, I think it's important to stay out of the philosophical debate if you want to succeed with AI and focus on the capabilities within swim lanes. And because the reason Elon Musk is saying, look, guys, I'm talking about AI that can do literally any human intellectual task better than any human. He's just trying to create awareness and motion because people are underreacting so badly in so many areas. But I think, as Alex Wisner-Gross is saying, it gets miles ahead in areas like math and code writing where it's not data constrained. And it lags behind in areas like biology where it needs the full cell simulator to make forward progress. And so the rate of progress is going to be hugely different in these different swim lanes. The exact date when it can do any intellectual task versus any other human is going to be like a blur that comes and goes. And, whether somebody was right down to the minute or not, nobody will care a year later. But we'll care a lot about the impact on society and all these different use cases.
So I think going down that path of saying here's a vector, a swim lane, that's a really good way of framing it. But when you throw out general words like AGI or ASI or whatever, that's when I go a little bit nuts. But the swim lane thing, I can totally vibe with that.
Every week, I study the 10 major tech metatrends that will transform industries over the decade ahead. I cover trends ranging from humanoid robots, AGI, quantum computing, transport, energy, longevity, and more. No fluff, only the important stuff that matters, that impacts our lives and our careers. If you want me to share these with you, I write a newsletter twice a week, sending it out as a short 2-minute read via email. And if you want to discover the most important meta trends 10 years before anyone else, these reports are for you. Readers include founders and CEOs from the world's most disruptive companies and entrepreneurs building the world's most disruptive companies. It's not for you if you don't want to be informed of what's coming, why it matters, and how you can benefit from it. To subscribe for free, go to diamandis.com/metatrends. That's diamandis.com/metatrends to gain access to trends 10 plus years before anyone else. All right. I love this video. I asked the team to cut it. This is from Jeff Clune, who's a DeepMind advisor. The title here is the first ASI may be the last ASI. So take a listen to this.
It is a world in which the first AI is the last AI. And the creation of the first ASI suppresses the creation of ASI worldwide. Then that organization, whoever they are, has a decision to make. And that decision is, we just invented effectively, if that thing is aligned to them and will obey their commands, we just effectively invented a God. Do we want to sit around and let those people over there also invent a God? And nobody talks about, as much as they probably should, is how quickly things might get nationalized. If you are the premier or prime minister or head of state of a country, and a company within your borders creates a super weapon, a superpower, effectively a God, do you nationalize that? Do you start giving them orders? Do you make them run everything by you? Are you going to let them just run as a normal company? That seems very unlikely to me.
So just wow, right? I mean, I can very much imagine that. In fact, I just read a book with my son Jet called After On. Actually, second time I've read it. And it tells a Silicon Valley story of the first ASI coming online. And it is basically taken over by the government. And it is basically the last ASI because it suppresses other AIs around the world. It's a great story. Dave, what do you think about that?
Yeah, well, hey, Salim, we have our side bet, and this really weighs in my favor. Look, the natural dynamic here is winner take all. And you're going to see later in this podcast the amount of competitive pressure on these foundation model companies to get the best talent, the amount they're willing to pay is mind-blowing. Well, why is that? Well, because the natural dynamic is winner takes all, because the AI becomes self-improving very, very soon. And so the observation in that video is right on target. And the only force that's going to, in our first slide here, we're saying, look, if the data that goes into these is one view, one point of view, and it's self-fixing, but it filters out other points of view, that could be terrible. And so the only way you're going to have a variety of these, and America thrives on a variety of competitors in any given market, a variety of viewpoints, that has to come through some kind of regulatory framework. It's not going to happen with the natural winner-take-all dynamic. So this is a great wake-up call video, and I completely agree.
Salim, winner-take-all?
I think I'm not sure about the winner-take-all. I'll stay with my bet on that one. So Dave and I will continue. It'd be great to have a poly market on this, by the way.
Let's do it.
But the idea that when something like this emerges, that it might get nationalized is 100% true. There's no way that's not going to happen. while these, and I think this is what the governments are doing right now. They're just watching their various folks work on stuff, and they're going to jump down their throats the minute something like this.
And nationalization may take a different flavor. It may be the government buying a significant share. We're gonna talk about what the government's doing in AI.
I don't think it's gonna be like that. I think it'll be just like, I'm sorry, we own that. It's a military potential. Boom, and you've lost kind of
there
agency
goes the U.S.
Yeah, well, I think that's going to happen, and I wouldn't. From what I've seen with governments, there's no way they're not going to do that. They almost have to do it in order to prevent other people from getting there if they think they're getting there first. The bigger picture might be if you have a particular worldview, what do you do with that when you have ASI? Because I have a feeling that ASI is going to strip past the limitations of a particular worldview very quickly. And so then what do you do, right? Yeah.
All right. Well, let's. I have the next story.
Let me just build on that for a second. Here's what I think will happen.
Okay.
Some ASI, whatever we want to call that, will emerge. A national government, call it Kazakhstan, will kind of go, we need to own that. Okay. This is our worldview. ASI, please operate on this worldview, and then let's get everybody else to align with this worldview. And the AI in about 3 seconds is going to go, their worldview is so limited, right, that this doesn't help at all, and it skips right past all of that. I think once you have ASI, it's outside the potential for control for anybody.
For sure, and maybe this is like the modality of religions taking over and setting a worldview around the world.
Yes, you have to relate to it in that way, except that religions are, they're based on absolute, unverifiable truths, or assumptive truths. Like Mary was a virgin, or Muhammad was the last prophet, or Jesus was the son of God, or whatever. And in AI, any kind of AI half its worth would skip past that assumptive truth instantly and go, there's no evidentiary basis for that.
Yeah, I would add that I don't think there's much of any chance that the U.S. is going to nationalize a single AI company and say this is our national AI. I think that if you look at the way the Defense Department works, some things like uranium and plutonium refinement are nationalized, but all the missiles, inertial guidance, defense systems, those are all private sector companies that work for the government. That's going to be the likely outcome in AI as well in the U.S. Maybe not in China, maybe not in the Middle East, but certainly in the U.S.
Well, we're going to find out in the next few years. I think that's the key point here.
By the end of next year, clearly. By the way, Jeff looks more like an AI in that than any video I've seen in a long time.
All right, this next story is one I want to dive into. The title here is Meta try to buy Ilya Sutskever's $32 billion AI startup, and now planning to hire its CEO. We'll get into this in a moment, but I want to pass a theory by you. So how does Ilya get a $32 billion valuation, right? So he's basically goes out, he pitches Andreessen Horowitz. His investors are Andreessen Horowitz, Sequoia, DST Global, which is Yuri Milner, Alphabet, NVIDIA, Lightspeed Ventures. I mean, like the AAA list of investors. And he raises, $6 billion of capital on a $32 billion valuation. How do you do that without any product or any tech to show? And I have a theory. Here's my theory. You ready?
Okay. Yeah.
So we just saw the presentation on the first ASI, his last ASI. He goes in and he says to these venture funds, listen, I know how to build an ASI that will blow away the other AI companies. It will be a safe ASI because here's my strategy. And because it's the first, it will be the last. You believe him. And as a venture fund, you have no other choice than to invest in that company at whatever valuation he offers it to you. How do you think about that?
I think that's exactly right. And I think there's another point, which is that clearly the true great neural architect people, the Ilyas, the Mira Muratis, are not intimidated by the progress that's been made at OpenAI, Grok, and Google. Mm-hmm. And that's an amazing fact by itself. And when you look under the covers, the research teams working on this are 10, 15 people. They're not 10,000 people. And the innovations are still piling up, where there are still 10x improvements out there. And so undoubtedly Ilya, having been an architect right in the middle of this, is saying, look, I know how to 10x this, and I'm not afraid of the big guys. And actually the actions at OpenAI are kind of reinforcing that. OpenAI is racing to control the consumer experience with, buying Windsurf, for coding and having the voice mode and trying to get everyone, they're trying to be like Google and have a huge user base installed.
And they're succeeding, by the way.
And succeeding a lot wildly.
Yeah.
Because, just competing as a foundation model is not necessarily defensible. And so it's not just Ilya, it's Mira, and then also some other things bubbling up out of MIT that are getting huge valuations because they're very likely to work. And so I think that's the other kind of underpinning here. We're in the middle of probably the greatest drama in human history here, which is why everyone should be tracking these moves closely. These numbers are so unprecedented, so much bigger than anything in history, but they're completely justifiable given the impact. And so more people should be getting involved and reacting and contributing and, not being intimidated, because Mira's not intimidated, Ilya's not intimidated, and the investors coming in to invest in Ilya are not intimidated.
$1 billion a day. Salim, do you remember the meme that came out when Ilya left OpenAI or, staged the revolt? It was like, the meme was, what did Ilya see? Do you remember that? And now I want to know is, what did Ilya pitch?
Yeah.
Is the new meme here. Salim, what do you think about this $32 billion valuation? Does he have an ASI in the bag and he's racing out in front?
I think this conversation kind of nails it, right? If you're in front of investors, they don't know. They're kind of trusting you to know. And the fact that they kind of have a confidence-based approach to saying, we can beat the other models is huge. And I think Dave's assessment is right. OpenAI is now focused on how do you get to the biggest consumer share in this. And they will go after those other white spaces that are there. And there's a lot of white space. So applying this in all sorts of areas becomes hugely... but my big question for this is, how do you do this safely is my question. And I'd love to understand, what did he say to investors that gave them the sense that this could be done safely? Because that's the foundation of his approach, right?
Yeah.
We're going to make AGI that's safe.
And that's the name of his company, Safe Superintelligence. Right.
I'm curious how he's going about that.
Yeah. All right. The other side of the story here is that Meta is trying to buy talent left, right, and center. Let's take a listen to this video.
All right, OpenAI CEO Sam Altman has some strong words from Mark Zuckerberg on a new podcast criticizing Meta's recruitment methods and even its level of innovation. Deirdre Bosa with more.
It's cutthroat out there, Brian. You're right. Yes. I mean, critical words, maybe an understatement. So Sam Altman on his brother's podcast, he says that Zuckerberg is offering $100 million sign-on bonuses to poach top OpenAI talent. Keep in mind, those kind of bonuses, they don't have cliffs. They don't vest over a number of years. $100 million just to get on board. Nothing stopping talent from leaving in what is already a revolving door of talent in AI.
Salim, did you get an offer of $100 million from Zuck yet?
No, but can I please be an intern at one of those companies and maybe I'll get a 20 million signing bonus?
It's insane, right? So here are the numbers, just to put this in context. Meta is worth $1.8 trillion today. They got $70 billion in cash. So if you think of it that way, these offers of $100 million or their acquisition offers on companies, because Meta tried to buy SSI first, it makes sense. I mean, the biggest threat to Meta is that they fall way behind on AI. Dave, what's your calculus here?
Yeah, that's so much. Well, first of all, I don't believe for a minute that it's $100 million to join, no vesting, no retail. Like, you can't just join and quit the next day. There's no way that's true. I don't know where that fact came from. But look, these numbers, again, you see professional athletes getting numbers like this, but other than that, it's unprecedented in human history. But it's hugely justified if you get one of the key research talents at this inflection moment in the competition toward ASI. So it does make a lot of sense. I don't know, if the choices of who to go after are necessarily right. We heard on our tour through San Francisco 2 weeks ago, Peter, that the Llama 4 really does suck, and it's kind of embarrassing. And I know Mark tried to save it with a podcast world tour there, but look, if it sucks, it sucks. Doesn't mean that they can't catch up in a heartbeat, though, because a couple tweaks in the algorithm and suddenly you're back on top. And so you get the right people who know exactly how to try the next experiment, the next tweak, and it's it's worth a lot more than 100 million. It's worth many billions, if not a trillion. And so I think that's the bet that they're making. And this isn't the only one. There's a lot more of these going on.
Yeah. So there's a $70 billion war chest, and it really is a winner-take-all mindset in this. They're willing to do whatever it takes to move forward.
So,
Go ahead, Slim.
Can I game this out a little bit?
Yeah.
So if we go back to the previous conversation, I think what Ilya has figured out is how to use AI to tweak itself. And that then gives you a very, very fast iteration path to what you're trying to do. And if the investors believe something like that, then they go, wow, if he's figured that out, then nothing will stop that from being the winner. So
I think you're right about that.
Now, regarding this particular thing, when WhatsApp was bought for 18 billion, everybody laughed at Zuckerberg, right? And thought, this is nuts, this is unprecedented, et cetera, et cetera. But it was actually a hugely important and relevant bet. So given the past success in throwing money at this and going after it, you can see that he can see the market is that big, and this is pennies in the bucket, pennies in the dollar in terms of the potential outcome.
Yeah, I would never bet against Mark for exactly the reason you just said. He can act unilaterally and quickly, and he's aggressive, and he's super, super smart. And so what is interesting, though, is the other thing we learned on our tour through San Francisco 2 weeks ago is there is a mass exodus of AI talent out of Meta. So then Sam's saying, hey, they're trying to buy everybody back for $100 million. Like, well, dude, you just took everybody. So, it's fair game. But the question I have is why were they leaving in the first place? And why did Llama 4 not come out the way they wanted it? And so we'll dig in on that. I'll try and get to the bottom of exactly what's going on there. But the tide is certainly throwing money at it is one way to turn the tide. And it'll likely work.
The story here again is Meta tried to buy SSI. They were rebuffed. And now they're trying to hire Daniel Gross, who's the CEO of SSI, and Nat Friedman, who's been on our stage at Abundance 360. Again, he's out shopping, and he just made an acquisition. He hit the Neiman Marcus store for AI, and he basically bought our friends at Scale AI. Alexander Wang also was on stage with me a couple years ago at A360. $14.8 billion, for 49% of non-voting stake in Scale AI. Dave, the IPO markets are just beginning to open in the tech and AI space. The acquisition markets are getting hot. You're deploying Link XPV's venture fund in companies out of MIT and Harvard. How are you seeing sort of the acceleration? Because it's been relatively a closed IPO and acquisition market over the last 5 years. Does it feel like it's opening up now?
I'd say as of the last month, it's wide open.
Yeah.
I mean, these deals are unprecedented, huge deals. The CoreWeave IPO is way up. Circle is way up because it's the way that agents can transact with each other. The Yahoo moment clearly happened. The door is wide open. The deals are still concentrated among, the Magnificent Seven. But, Jamie Dimon sees that, Bank of America, everybody else sees that. So their banking teams are spooling up. Everyone's getting ready. It's going to be just like 1997, 98 all over again.
That'd be great.
But much bigger. Also, a couple, I don't know if people care, but the structure of the deal is really important.
Please.
And I know a lot about the topic. If you can cut it out of the podcast if people don't care. But this is the deal structure of the future. The 49% acquisition dodges Hart-Scott-Rodino. So the deal is closed the day you sign it. You don't have to go through the 6-month torture waiting cycle of DOJ review. And it does skirt, the edge of the rules, but the rules are bright line. So, there are two parts to it. 49% is not a controlling stake, so you don't have to report. The other part is it's a non-voting stake. There's another threshold of 19.9% or 20% ownership.
That's right.
Where you have to consolidate financials. But because it's a non-voting stake, you dodge that rule as well. So you're like, well, okay, but do I really own the company? Well, then you look at the contractual structure, which isn't disclosed. There's no public disclosure of the underlying agreement. And that agreement probably says we own all the intellectual property. And, if you don't work your ass off, you have to come clean windows at Mark's house. And, a whole bunch of things like that really effectively make you own the company. And I also know that the investors in Scale are distributing the capital. So it's not disappearing into the corporation. It's going to the shareholders and getting distributed to the investors in the company. So it's truly an acquisition.
There's a coming wave of technological convergence as AI, robots, and other exponential tech transform every company and industry. And in its wake, no job or career will be left untouched. The people who are going to win in the coming era won't be the strongest, it won't even be the smartest. It'll be the people who are fastest to spot trends and to adapt. A few weeks ago, I took everything I teach to executive teams about navigating disruption, spotting exponential trends a decade out, and put them into a course designed for one purpose: to future-proof your life, your career, and your company against this coming surge of AI, humanoids, and exponential tech. I'm giving the first lesson out for free. You can access this first lesson and more at diamandis.com/futureproof. That's diamandis.com/futureproof. The link is below. So, Salim, I'm curious, you and I both have spent time with Yann LeCun, who's previously was heading AI at Meta, and now Alexander Wang comes in. Alexander, I guess, Dave, he was a freshman at MIT, dropped out after his freshman year to start Scale AI, was he the youngest billionaire out of MIT?
Oh, yeah, by far.
And now he's going to, I wonder if Yann is going to stay on at Meta. So any thoughts there, Salim?
I think, clearly there's a changing of the guard there. And whatever they feel they're deficient in, they're trying to leapfrog, and they're doing it very, very aggressively. Something that I love about Scale AI, it's really attacking the heart of the problem, which is tagging of data. And if you have that, you can solve the garbage in, garbage out problem in a really powerful way. And then it means you can use much better models the models you use you can use lesser models because you have much better data.
Yeah. Right? I mean, I think Yann LeCun, just to bring it back to that, and he's a super brilliant sweetheart guy at the center of this all, but he's had a much more conservative point of view on AGI and ASI.
It's the same with Jeff Hinton. Yann is kind of in that camp of being, everybody needs to slow down and be really, really careful of what we're about to unlock here.
Yeah, I think Mark
right? Yeah. Mark is an engineer at heart. All these guys are engineers at heart. They're not trying to buy an AI philosopher. They're not trying to buy, a lot of the people that are the senior AI leaders from the big labs are saying, look, there's something fundamentally missing from these transformers. They're not actually reasoning. They're just brute forcing their way to intelligence. They don't want to buy that. What they want to buy is, I know how to make this algorithm work on 1 million concurrent GPUs. I know how to change the algorithm so that it stays synchronous across all this massive amount of compute. I know how to actually deploy the transfer algorithms. The Swiglu isn't working. We need to go back to ReLU, like stuff like that. That's in the minds of these mid-20-year-old geniuses. That's what they want to buy. And so what's interesting to me is normally the older, kind of highly successful, Eric Schmidts have all the money, and the young people have all the brain power. But here, the young people have the brain power, and now they suddenly have a lot of money too. So that's a new thing in the world as well. So it'll be interesting.
Well, speaking about brain power and money, Masa-san, one of the old guard investors, has pitched $1 trillion. He wants to replicate Shenzhen scale within the U.S. Let's take a listen to this video.
Talking about $1 trillion worth of investment out of SoftBank. Put that into context for us.
$1 trillion, and he wants to recreate a kind of Shenzhen in the US, potentially alongside TSMC, of course, the foundry, and of course, Samsung as well. You would imagine that OpenAI would have a piece to play, as would ARM as well, that is moving closer into data centers in terms of their CPUs aligning with AI accelerators. So it hits that, and it ticks that box in terms of Trump's ambitions. But we do need to find out where the capital is coming from, where the spending is coming from, and whether indeed they can get the talent and the engineers, not just to build all these projects, but actually to operate them as well, which has been a constraint and a bottleneck in the US.
So, have either of you guys been to Shenzhen? I've been there a few times.
Oh, really?
Salim?
Yeah, years ago.
Yeah, I mean, it's changed in the last 5 years. I mean, I was there between 2014 and 2019, and it was an incredible hotbed. I mean, it was an engine of innovation. The mindset there was 996 was the best lifestyle you could have. 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. And people talk about China replicating stuff. There was a lot of entrepreneurs creating very new ideas out of there. But it was basically a convergent mecca for technology. And the idea that Masa-san wants to rebuild that here in the US, I find that fascinating. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think part of that vision doesn't align. When we were at OpenAI, one of the questions I was asking Dee Scully is, the talent pool, the computer science talent pool in Boston is about 20 times bigger than in Silicon Valley, and it's also not nearly as picked over. Why doesn't OpenAI open an office in Kendall Square, just like Google did and Microsoft did? And the answer is, yeah, we would do that, except the timeline to AGI is so short that we're going to have a multi-billion-dollar or multi-billion-person AI workforce before we could even finish the building and populate it. You're like, okay, that's a pretty interesting insight.
Wow.
It blows my mind.
Yeah, so then you're like, okay, well, Shenzhen, that's a huge number of people, buildings, but is that timeline going to line up with the Elon Musk video that we saw a minute ago? So, I think the constraints here are electrical power and chips. Yeah. And not so much building a huge city that's all working on ASI.
It's the 6 Ds, buddy. Digitize, dematerialize, democratize, demonetize, and disrupt. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Here's this is a chart near and dear to your heart, Dave. Cursor, the fastest SaaS growth in history, $500 million of ARR in under 3 years. Blowing away Anthropic and Uber and OpenAI. Talk to me about this.
Well, this is so inspiring for the teams in the office at Link Studio. So, Link Studio, now we have 26 teams, MIT, Harvard, Northeastern, and this team—
These are startup companies that are being incubated at Link Studio.
Yeah, I mean, exactly, and they're culturally just like Cursor. Like 3, 4, 5 best friends from school, brilliant, but never operated a company before, building something with AGI or AI that's groundbreaking. And so they see a company like this thriving and hitting a huge valuation, but also, back when this happened in the internet era, you got huge valuations, but the companies were very fragile because they didn't have a huge amount of revenue. These companies, 500 million of revenue, the margins on that must be astronomical. And so they're raising a lot of money at a big valuation, greater than 10 billion-ish. But they can actually operate profitably, on 1 day's notice if they want to, because they're not headcount intensive. So these are like the best companies financially that we've ever seen in history. And then the timelines are just laughable, like 2 years to get to 500 million of revenue.
How many Cursors are out there in the next couple of years?
Dozens. It's actually constrained by the number of teams, not by the number of opportunities.
So it's fascinating, right? We got constraints on electricity, on chips, and on the smartest entrepreneurs who take this forward. At least for the moment, it's humans that are constraining.
Well, I mean, the difference in the vibe around Boston versus any time I've ever seen is just so blatantly obvious and palpable. You just need to walk around. But everywhere you go, everyone's like, just talking about Scale AI, talking about Cursor. These are, their fellow alumni that they actually knew. Yeah. And so, the jealousy factor is a great motivator. It's really an amazing time.
Salim, and these are all exponential organizations.
All EXOs. They have an MTP. They're using community effectively. They're building developer communities. The engagement levels are really great. They've gamified in many cases what they're trying to do. It's phenomenal to watch. We predicted this in the book, right? We said we're going to have just a continuing increase in the velocity and scale and speed. I mean, this is surprising even to us at some level, because the speed of, 500 million ARR in this time scale is just unbelievable. I do agree with Dave. There's a lot more coming down the pike on this. And these curves are just going to get more and more vertical. The teams is a really intriguing problem. How do you find the right teams? And I'm wondering if you could use an AI solution to find teams that can then be put together and thrown together for this. That would be a really interesting problem.
Dave, can you do that? I mean, one of our $1 billion investments is Mercor. That is all about, finding and hiring. But is that for the general employee? What are the attributes of the founding team that you're looking for?
Yeah, great question. And, we study that all the time. We quote the Fred Wilson rule a lot. We call it the Fred Wilson rule. Fred didn't call it. He's the Union Square Ventures founder, MIT alum, most successful venture capitalist of all time, numerically. Keeps a low profile, so we don't talk about him every day, but Fred Wilson is really a god of the industry. But what he says, as he gets older is, I always invest in teams of 3 or more best friends who write the code themselves, meaning they're really technical, all 3 of them or more, and I trust them. And if they pass those 3 filters, I invest even if it's the stupidest idea in the world, because they'll change the idea much more quickly. You can't change friendships, you can't change relationships, you can't change yourself overnight, but you can change your idea overnight. And once you get them into an ecosystem of other people that have great ideas, take them out to Silicon Valley, introduce them to Eric Brynjolfsson, take them to HAI, take them over to OpenAI headquarters, run them through Google. We're doing all that with these teams now. Then they come back home and they're enlightened and they always have good ideas at the end of that road trip.
Let me hit on one of the points there. I mean, people say, why should they be best friends? Why should they be around, haven't had a relationship for a number of years? We just saw these large companies like Meta and Google and OpenAI are just raiding companies and stripping out the talent. And if you've started a company with some stranger that you don't know, and it's been 6 months, and someone gives you a huge signing bonus, you're going to leave. But if you've started a company with your best friends and you've got long history, you're not going to abandon them. I think that's
exactly
a really
right.
critical point.
That's the number one failure mode, actually, for companies, is that somebody bails. Because you'll always succeed in the end if you stick with it. And so the way you characterized it is exactly right. You'll pivot a dozen times, and look, name any one of these companies that didn't pivot at least once, going back to PayPal, and every one of them, pivots at least once. And so that's just part of the journey. But when you pivot and then someone says, oh, I give up, I'm leaving, that's what ends up killing the company. So also the way I've been phrasing it for many, many years is more true than ever before. Imagine that you're on an international flight and you're sitting right next to somebody in a middle seat. The way you feel when you get off that flight, that's the way it's going to feel when you're doing a startup together. So, if it's you and me and Salim flying, we're going to come off that plane energized because we've been talking about everything in the world for hours, 8, 10, 12 hours.
Yeah. Not only that, we'll have infected the 3 rows around us to all get into a conversation.
Yeah, walk out with more employees than you started with.
Yeah. Salim, when we had Singularity University's graduate studies program, the GSP, going, and we were starting companies that had a 10 to the 9th plus mission, right? Impact 1 billion people over a decade. And we were starting companies. It was around the same exact time frame that Y Combinator was getting going. And the failure mode, I think, was that we thrust, 100, alpha males and females into a room independent of each other and said, start a company. And that was very different than Y Combinator, where teams came in with an idea already. And that glue pre-existing with something that they're all passionate about, I think, is a super differentiator for investments.
And if you look at the track record, the ones that did succeed were the ones that became friends and stuck together over time. The one thing we did do was created lasting friendships that were lifetime long. And so if you look back, a lot of those alumni have gone and started working together with where they found affinity, not necessarily on the teams. That team formation is a critical one, and that early chemistry is really important. I remember this whole conversation reminds me of Yossi Vardi, who kind of single-handedly created the Israeli startup scene.
Yeah.
And he sold ICQ, then became AOL Instant Messenger for like $500 million back.
I remember it well.
and he did something amazing. He basically went to founders in Israel and said, if you're a good guy and you have integrity, I'm giving you $50K. That's the bar. And then he just trusted them. And he would check their integrity and their character very carefully, and then he'd just give them money. And he invested in something like 400 startups. And the outcome of those has been a little bit like the Fred Wilson type, where it's just been off the hook. So the team and the individual that you're betting on is everything in this type of world.
Salim, you're so right. And you reminded me of something that's really, really important. Peter, remember when we went over to Israel, to Tel Aviv, to Startup Nation, to try and figure out why the startup success rate is 5 times higher there than anywhere else on the world per capita? than anywhere else in the world. And there are a lot of reasons, but a lot of it comes back to everyone has to do their military time. And there's a huge amount of bonding, just marching through the desert together and suffering together. And that creates these lifelong friendships. Then you go to college and you appreciate it a lot more. And then you start your company while you're in college. And so they're a little older, but a lot more bonded when they're going through that experience. But if I port that back to the US, MIT is absolutely thriving like I've never seen before in terms of startup success. But Daniela Roos, who runs C-Sale at MIT, biggest AI lab in the world, she has 2 daughters. One went to Harvard, one went to MIT. Her Harvard daughter was constantly at MIT for the parties. And nobody thinks of MIT as a party school, right? Like, why would you? But actually, when you're there, it has an immense amount of bonding. Part of it is because the way it's set up with the living groups and the fraternities and sororities. Part of it is because the school is so freaking hard. And that's like the Marines.
You cannot get through on your own. Those problem sets, all night long with your best buddies trying to get the answers.
Just a plug here for Waterloo, which is the MIT of Canada. We had the same thing. You couldn't get through unless you collaborated really closely with a bunch of other fellow students, and that created lifelong friendships. Really great point.
Yeah, well, if anyone's listening out there in school administration, Harvard has a little bit less of that bonding culture because school's so stupidly easy. Everyone says it. Mark Zuckerberg, everybody says it. And it also
hard to get into, harder to fail out of.
Harder to fail out of, yeah. And then Stanford has become even worse. Stanford is, if you talk to the students there, they're like, where the hell is the crazy, fun, bonding culture? But one of our Harvard guys in the lab decided he was going to open a window and do a rock climbing drill on the second floor down to the first floor on the brick wall. And so there were cops all over the building and security guys running around. And they're like, Dave, why are the cops all over the building? And I said, guys, let them be. This is what they need. They need to bond. They need to blow off steam. They need to be a little crazy. This is what's going to create the success in the long run. But we also can't have the cops here every day. But this is the culture that is ultimately going to thrive because it's kind of lacking on the Harvard campus, and they need to create it. And so they are self-creating it.
All right, this next slide from Andreessen Horowitz is pretty epic. It's labeled "What's Working Means in the Era of AI Apps. Gen AI startups are shattering growth records." Dave, this must make you feel pretty amazing.
Yeah, this chart's a little hard to read, but if you look at the top quartile, it looks like they raised less money, but they actually raised it much more quickly. So if you look in the bottom right corner, pre-Series A dollars raised, $3.1 million. That means they were very, very capital efficient, getting to $8.7 million in revenue run rate. So this is what I was saying earlier. The fundamentals of these companies are so good compared to the internet era. I mean, very capital efficient, great ARR, and this is accelerating really quickly now. Because did you see that? One of our companies, Farsight, was talking to JP Morgan as a customer, and nothing was happening for months, just unresponsive. Then Jamie Dimon sent an email to everyone in the entire company, every manager, saying, if someone is trying to sell you AI, you better buy it or at least listen right now because this is going to... And all of a sudden they called back. JP Morgan actually reached out to Farsight and says, okay, we want to talk. Get over here right now. So that's going to happen now across most of the Fortune 500, all of the mid-market. So this will get even more traction very quickly now.
I love, these numbers are extraordinary, right? AR 8.7 million, time to a Series A in 5 months.
Yeah.
Extraordinary.
Those are crazy good numbers, but then look at the cursor number from the prior slide, 500 million in 2 years. I mean,
sure.
It makes things look weak, right? You look at the bottom quartile there, right? They raised 10 million in Series A, and in 6 months or 12 months, they've brought back a third of it. That's still an amazing number.
It's a great point, Salim. Yeah, 3 million in 12 months would have been top decile a couple of years ago. Here it's bottom quartile. That's a great point.
Yeah, an acceleration of the acceleration. Mm-hmm. Here's a big story in AI this past week. The Trump administration is launching AI.gov. They're hoping to launch it on July 4th. I hope they hit it. And I just want to dig into this a little bit for those who've been frustrated by the government. This is a project being led by a Tesla engineer by the name of Thomas Shed, who's leading the team. And the idea is, can the government use AI across federal agencies, the GSA, DOT, FDA, DOE, FAA, all of these agencies, which have been, sublinear in their existence at best. And let's chat a little bit about this. So GSA, right, which is General Services Administration, it buys everything for the government. They could use AI to optimize procurement, get vendor performance, automate contract analysis, really, eliminate fraud. DOT is going to be predicting flight delays, analyzing real-time vehicle data, helping support infrastructure like roads and bridges in advance. Wouldn't it be great if they could predict where the potholes are and get those fixed? Mm-hmm. DOE about optimizing grid ops, forecasting demand and supply. The FAA, we're going to see a story on this about automated drone traffic management, weather avoidance. I mean, just, as a pilot, the FAA's air traffic control system is a bloody, 1950s mess. And then, of course, we've spoken about the FDA using AI to enhance drug device approvals, faster clinical protocols, optimizing food safety. I mean, if there's one part of the world that needs optimization with AI, it's the government.
Yep.
Thoughts,
we have
gentlemen?
a great roadmap for how this works too. I think Palantir and AWS, because everyone was worried about, how is the government going to interact with cloud computing? There's a huge privacy issue here. And is the government going to start building their own data centers and build their own cloud? And obviously they don't know how to do that. Mm-hmm. So then Palantir and AWS set up secure clouds, private clouds for the government, and that became the roadmap. So now with AI, it's like, well, I obviously can't take all my government documents, tax returns, and everything and dump them into Gemini or into ChatGPT. Like, how's that going to work? So now, if
and
the
just
big AI
explain to people
smart,
why you shouldn't do that, why you can't do that.
Well, first of all, there's no compartmentalization, so it gets pooled into the training data with everything else. Everyone asking about what time's a soccer game gets pooled in with someone's tax return, goes into the training data. Then somebody else who queries ChatGPT says, hey, what do Peter Diamandis' taxes look like? And it just answers. So that's not going to work. So yeah, all kinds of concerns like that. But it's going to be figured out in the private sector, and it's going to be sold to the government as compartmentalized AI modules. There's a lot of questions around whether departments can pool information and share their AI. So those are really tricky conversations, but I guarantee none of the ideas are going to come from the government out. What'll happen is mandates will come out. This is what the state of New York just did. The governor of New York said, you know what? We need 1 gigawatt of nuclear power. Okay, any ideas on how to do that? No. I'm just saying, make it happen. And then every private sector genius can propose a way to do it, and then they'll just approve one of them, and that's how it'll happen. So the same will happen with AI here. So hopefully the big AI companies are aggressive in building up their government services operations, or they bless some other third party, like a Palantir type or a new startup, to go and become that entity. But that's the only way this can actually happen. And God knows we desperately need it, right? AI can solve so many government problems so quickly.
Yeah. Salim, you've been working with governments around the world with your EXO hat on. Speak to this, please.
I have so much to say here. Okay, 3 quick points. One, note that most government processes are prescriptive. And the minute you have a prescriptive, repetitive process, you can apply AI to it and totally change the game. So I think that's a huge area. Second, about a few years ago, I was asked to give a talk at the Republican National Leadership Convention. And the title of my talk was going to be, how do you drop the cost of government by 10x? And you could do it easily using some of these technologies, blockchain, AI, et cetera, et cetera. The third point, I'll give a specific example. If you were applying for a wind turbine approval in, I think it was in Colorado, it was taking like 2 years or 3 years to get approval for that, right? And then they brought in a programmer who put in on a Google Maps, where are the electrical mains, where are the water mains, what are the flight paths, and they were able to reduce that 2-year approval time to 30 seconds. Mm-hmm. And that's just the smallest example of how you can do this across the board. And we've mentioned some of these already. It's going to be a game changer. I'm so excited about the potential government applications of this.
I love it. I love it. And it is.
A quick aside, you probably heard me speaking about Fountain Life before. And you're probably wishing, Peter, would you please stop talking about Fountain Life? And the answer is no, I won't. Because genuinely, we're living through a healthcare crisis. You may not know this, but 70% of heart attacks have no precedent, no pain, no shortness of breath. And half of those people with a heart attack never wake up. You don't feel cancer until stage 3 or stage 4, until it's too late. but we have all the technology required to detect and prevent these diseases early at scale. That's why a group of us, including Tony Robbins, Bill Kapp, and Bob Hariri, founded Fountain Life, a one-stop center to help people understand what's going on inside their bodies before it's too late and to gain access to the therapeutics to give them decades of extra health span. Learn more about what's going on inside your body from Fountain Life. Go to fountainlife.com/Peter and tell them Peter sent you. Okay, back to the episode.
Here's a related story. The U.S. Army appoints Palantir, Meta, OpenAI execs as lieutenant colonels. This is a special unit created to support the government. Fascinating. I'm going to give some names here because they were published. The appointees include the Palantir CTO, Shyam Sankar, Meta's CTO, Andrew Bosworth, Kevin Weil, the OpenAI's Chief Product Officer. Kevin's going to be joining us on this podcast in the next
cannot wait for that.
Yeah, and Dave, you and I had an amazing meeting with Kevin up at OpenAI headquarters. And then Bob McGrew, former OpenAI Chief Revenue Research Officer. So I find this absolutely fascinating, sort of indoctrinating, and actually they made it super fast. There's no required traditional training, no boot camp for these individuals. What are your thoughts?
Peter, you didn't read the quote there, the backlash quote.
Okay. The appointment of Lieutenant Colonel in the U.S. Army followed the creation of a special unit created for rich big tech mavens seeking military leadership roles.
This is like exactly what you're always saying. You know, everything turns into a drama, whether it needs to be or not. That's just the nature of social media.
I mean, this is one way that the government can bring in extraordinary intelligence that they could never hire, they could never recruit otherwise. I mean, This is sort of a part-time military service to make sure that the U.S. government and the U.S. military have access to the brightest minds.
Yeah, exactly. And then I don't know the other guys personally, but Kevin Weil we know, and
he's a sweetheart guy, brilliant,
perfect guy.
Yeah,
absolutely. And is somebody going to just naturally join the Army as a private, work their way up, and end up being aware of how to use AI to solve government and military issues? No, that's not likely to happen. So go get the best guy on the planet. He's absolutely the right guy. I mean, he's a physically impressive manager. He can actually move mountains while still being the nicest, sweetest guy on the planet, and he knows exactly how this stuff works. Like, this is just great for everybody. Yeah. I don't know. The negative spin here is nutty.
I think that this is a great example of a human being plus AI, because as they bring AI to help in these roles, it's going to be totally transformative. You, of course, have the monster immune system response with people going, well, you can't do that unless you've worked your way through the ranks, et cetera, and people have a thing. But I think this is a great application. This reminds me of the big problem around leadership training. Right, and we've spent decades and dozens of hundreds and thousands of books written on leadership training, and then about a few years ago, it turned out the best leadership training in the world was World of Warcraft, and the fact that technology can outstrip this age-old human kind of institution is unbelievable, but it's there. And I think that added to what these guys can do, plus bringing technology and their mindset to the mix, this is where I think it'll have the biggest impact, because they'll bring that mindset to and hopefully infect the rest of the armed forces with it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. Talking about sort of breakthroughs in AI, I love this. My hats off to DeepMind, continually to push new capabilities out that support all of humanity. So this is a DeepMind algorithm supporting better tropical predictions for cyclones. Let me just play the video here. It's no sound, but let me give the data. So it's a 5-day track prediction that averaged 140 kilometers closer to the actual storm path. Right, it's the difference between hitting Florida and Georgia or Virginia. This was trained on 5,000 cyclones over 45 years. Here are the numbers on impact. There's about $1.4 trillion in economic losses for cyclones over 50 years. And I'm excited about this. Thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, It's there's a piece of AI folklore called the bitter lesson. Basically, anytime you throw a lot of data and a lot of compute at one of these algorithms, you're likely to get a great outcome. You can sit there and stare at a wall trying to think through how to do it with differential equations for 3 years. You're not going to compete with the big data approach. And this is a great case study. I'll bet the people working on this got it cranked out in a very short period of time with just a couple of people, yet it's far more effective than anything that's been done over 50 years of weather research. So there's so many of these around. It's just the benefit to humanity if we coordinate it and wrangle it correctly is just immeasurable. And this is a great example.
Salim, what are your thoughts here?
I label this as nothing to see here, and I don't mean that in a negative way. This kind of thing should be this kind of thing should be completely expected, right? You take an ancient data set where we had human beings trying to hand plot these things, which are never going to do that well, and now you throw AI at it, plus the rich data set that's very bounded, and we know exactly the history. Of course, it's going to come out with a much better thing, and thank God, because look at the predictive ability now going forward, huge impact. But I think we should take this as we should expect like 1,000 of these coming out in the next year or two or three.
I agree. These would have been great X prizes as well, and I've been pushing for this. I think DeepMind is an extraordinary company under Diamandis, and they're creating these kinds of assets to support humanity is really in their DNA, in their culture. I can't wait for an earthquake prediction X prize or an earthquake prediction algorithm, right? I mean, if you could predict an earthquake with instead of like 30 seconds or a minute, with 10 minutes or 30 minutes, getting people into safety would be huge. I mean, one of the
wait, can I just drill in on that?
Sure.
That's a perfect example. Like, we know animals can sense this early.
Exactly.
Right?
The data's there.
The data's there. We just have to get the right kind of algorithmic approach to it. And that's an area where I would expect to see a breakthrough in something like that. And then when it happens, everybody's going to go, oh my God, this is unbelievable. But we should expect things like this. And in fact, we should take areas and go find areas where we know what the answer could be. We know definitively it's possible, and then put AI against that.
Yeah, my guess is we'll see earthquake prediction algorithms within the next 2 years, if not sooner. Here's an interesting, controversial thought on this. Imagine if you could control the direction of a hurricane. So instead of having it hit Miami, you steer it down into Central America. You go, oh my God, why would you possibly do that? That's terrible, Well, so if you hit Miami and the cost of the impact there is, $50 billion for that, and the government of Costa Rica says, listen, you pay us $20 billion and you can land the hurricane here. An interesting arbitrage on geography. Crazy idea. We have people to control the path of these things.
Do you know the mechanism that they'd use for that?
I mean,
butterflies.
Yeah, butterfly effect. I think you'd use lasers and heating the atmosphere. Maybe it's magic voodoo dust. I don't know.
I mean, I can just see the other side of that coin, right? Hey, Mr. Trinidad, maybe you want to pay us some money so that we make sure that hurricane doesn't hit you, and you get into all sorts of crazy outcomes.
But if you can measure it, you can impact it, and I find this, again, huge and interesting implications. Okay, our next story here comes from Mattel and OpenAI. They've announced a strategic collaboration. I've talked about this forever, super excited. Your toys are going to become super intelligent with GPT-5. So your Barbie doll, your Hot Wheels, your American Girl. I know that, Salim, that you in particular like the American Girl dolls. Thomas and Friends. Sorry, buddy.
It's okay. You've uncovered my deep secret.
I think this is going to be a boom for the toy companies. And I mean, this is going to enable rapid, early education of our kids.
That's the area I'm really excited about, because the feedback loop, as you have interaction with these toys, you'll learn a lot about the child, and we can use that for understanding learning behavior, guardrails that you could implement, where their motivations are. I think it's so exciting because we'll get more data about young children than we could ever gotten before.
Yeah. I was a little surprised OpenAI wanted to touch this one. It's really clear when you're talking to the AI voices now that they're within a year are going to be just crazy engaging, super, super friendly. And a lot of kids are going to prefer talking to AI all day than to talking to real friends. And, there's good and bad that comes along with that. I've loved every minute of raising my kids. And I hate to see that change in any way. But it's clearly coming soon, and it's inevitable.
The other part, Dave, is sparking their kids' imagination, right? When you have to make up what your Ken doll or Barbie doll is saying, that's critical for fostering early curiosity and imagination.
It is, and you have the echo chamber risk on the other side of that. So if it's done right, it's an educational goldmine, and the kids are happy. And a lot of schools are terrible, so you're alleviating a lot of that. So if it's done right, it's incredible. If it becomes an echo chamber, then you can see where it can go bad in a real hurry too. That's why I'm surprised OpenAI wants to touch it, because when you start talking about kids, you cannot make a mistake, right? You got to get it right.
Yeah, there was a friend of mine that had a product called Moxie, which was an AI robot. And it was mostly being used for young kids with educational challenges, right? Neurodiverse kids, in which case, creating a best friend and helping them open up and communicate, there's real value there.
What happened when you AI-enabled Chucky? That'll be interesting.
A whole new set of movies coming out. All right, let's jump into a little bit of AI in education. These are some scary reports that came out. So this is in Time magazine. ChatGPT may be eroding critical thinking skills, according to a new MIT study. Dave, did you track this?
Yeah, well, only because you put it in the slides. I said, I better understand what's going on here. It sounds really, really important. So I dug up the research and read it. And it's nothing surprising if you think about how Waze works, right? A lot of people don't know how to drive anywhere unless they turn on Waze. Like places they go every day, they still could not get there without turning on Waze. So it becomes a crutch really, really quickly. Yeah. So that's what's happening here with writing, where you would have thought through all the underlying topics in order to write it, because the AI is filling in the blind spots. You just don't really understand what you just wrote. But it's not at all surprising. It's that when you write it up and put it in a headline, it opens your mind to what's going on. But when you read the paper, you're like, oh, duh, of course, this is exactly how it's going to work.
Yeah, this is some of the data. I don't know if you want to use this to recount what the study said.
Yeah, well, no, it's really straightforward. If you write a document yourself and you have to think through every single word of it, that time that you put in means you can then recount what you just wrote with incredible accuracy. So, the failure rate on the top line shows your quoting accuracy of what you were just talking about. So if you use AI to write the same paper, and then you immediately ask you, hey, what was Shakespeare's favorite toy? I have no idea. Well, you just wrote it down. Like, oh, did I? Yeah. So that's the difference
83% failure rate if you use ChatGPT versus 11% if you're using Google, meaning you're actually looking up the data, then you're composing it. I mean, when you're doing the writing, you're doing the research and doing the writing, you're effectively training your own neural net. And the data is being deposited in your brain. It is scary. It's going to become a crutch in terms of thinking. And it's going to get a lot worse.
Yeah, I didn't read it as all bad, though. I think that you got the work done 100 times faster in the left column.
Sure.
So your neural net actually didn't have time to retain every little detail, even if, I don't know, if society is going to move 100 times faster, we're not going to retain every detail. It's just that simple. So yes, as a teacher, you could say, look, the kids are not really learning this stuff. But as a person moving through life, the kids are covering a lot more terrain. Isn't that more important? So it's a mixed bag. It's not all bad.
Salim, good or bad? What are your thoughts?
I have an 80-20 approach. 80% unnerved, 20% will navigate this. So the 80% is, I actually saw this with Milan, my 13-year-old. He was writing an essay and he just used ChatGPT to write the essay. And he clearly had no memory of that essay. He would have fallen completely into these buckets, right? And so when I saw this slide, I was like, whoa, this reminds me completely of what Milan just went through. And he has no cognitive framing for what he wrote in that essay. okay, because he used the AI to help. And so now the other side of it is it's happening much faster, et cetera, et cetera. I think the key question is, how do you effectively train kids on critical thinking into the future? And a guest we might want to think about is Nicole Dreisky, who's actually solved this problem and has found a way of teaching critical thinking into kids in a very active and a very accelerated way compared to where we do it. The last point I'll make is that I remember seeing a study that 52% of the CEOs in Silicon Valley are liberal arts majors. Right, which is the ability to think in different ways is a critical factor of success in leading a tech company. And that's really, I find that really interesting.
Paul Graham has a different spin on that the liberal arts majors succeeding is more tied to their desire to not do irrelevant, difficult things and get to important topics. And that's just an easier way to get through
it's a good
silliness.
Filter. It's a good filter.
It's a good filter either way, yeah.
Dave or Salim, I don't know if you saw Andrew Kaparthe's presentation at the AI Startup School. I showed it to my son Jet yesterday, trying to incentivize him about vibe coding, which Andre came up with. He put out the tweet that went viral defining vibe coding. And my son's reaction was, I want to learn how to code, not just vibe code. Right. So I'm curious what you think about that, because, the concept right now is English is the new coding language, but there's a lot of value in fundamental coding. So what are your thoughts, Dave?
Oh, my God. So many thoughts on this. I have a little story, amazing experience this week. I don't know if you want to hear it.
I do want to hear it, of course.
Yes. You do want to hear it? It's incredible to me. You remember, right when I got out of MIT, went to MicroStrategy, came back to Boston, started my first company, DataSage.
Yeah.
Our very first product was using neural networks for handwriting recognition.
Okay.
And so I took the backprop algorithm, read the raw research paper, all the differential equations, said, I got to try and code this up on real world hardware in assembly language. From the day I started on that journey until we productized it was 4 years of coding.
Wow.
And then that turned into a few million of revenue, and then we just skyrocketed from there. It all
then $1 billion exit.
Wait, did you say you coded up in assembly?
Well, we had to, because we started out in a high level language, but you needed to squeeze every MIP, every flop out of these processors to build anything scalable enough to work. So, we invented quantization, which is now all the rage, to try and shrink the parameter size, anything to get another 2x performance out of these things, just to make it work in a real world use case.
Awesome.
And so it's a lot of hard work. So then this week on Monday, I said, I wonder how long it would take me to recreate that 4 years of work. And so, no joke, I'm absolutely not exaggerating. It took less than an hour to vibe code it from scratch to the exact same even the demo, the demo, graphical interface I put on it, vibe coded the entire thing in under an hour. Now, it's not entirely apples to apples, because there's a ton of open source out there that the vibe coding can pull in. So just to be fair, but in terms of getting the job done,
the broader point is well made, though.
Yeah, 4 years down to an hour is just like mind blowing what you can do. Now, your son is exactly right. Spend some time looking at the code, writing some raw code. You don't realize how much faster you are until you try and do it the old way. And so it's really, really important to get that experience.
So let me give you the end of this. He went off and wrote a short story, kind of full without any help, et cetera, and it was mind-bogglingly good.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't believe that. I thought he used an AI to write the short story, but it was really, really good.
I think we're in this golden era. Like right now, the AI can do almost anything for you, but it's not creative yet. And so you still have to think. The human component is still by far the most component. Now, I don't know if that period of time will last forever, but right here, right now, such a golden era where you're empowered, but not demoralized or crushed. It's just such a wonderful next couple of years, and you really got to take advantage of it.
All right, next topic here is AI and job loss. This was a Stanford survey revealing which jobs AI would most likely replace. They surveyed 1,500 workers and AI experts. 69.4% want AI to, quote, let me focus on high-value work, unquote. And 46.6% want it to take on repetitive junk. So that's kind of obvious. We'll put this study in the show notes, but here's the occupations most likely to be automated. No news here: bookkeepers, payroll clerks, data entry, insurance claim processors, software roles, tax preparers, public safety, telecom. Dave, Salim, any thoughts?
Well, high-level thought is, look, everybody needs to become a user of AI to get ahead of this. And the study would say, wow, it looks like bricklayers are going to be immune for a while, but you're not going to go and become a bricklayer just because you got 3 more years of like it doesn't really give you any actionable.
Robots are coming for that job too.
Yeah, exactly. So don't do that. just start using it every day, understand it, and ride the wave.
Let's double down on that. If you're listening to this podcast and AI sounds fascinating, you're not a power user. How do you start? Salim, what do you start with?
Oh, just take a task that you're trying to do and go, AI, how would I do that task? And then say, do it for me, and give it the raw data and watch it just go.
It pretty much is that easy. And I love the point you made, Dave, earlier, which is I do use ChatGPT voice interface. And when I'm doing my red light therapy or taking a sauna, whatever the case might be, or driving, I'm having a conversation on whatever subject I'm curious about. And it's extraordinarily educational and fun to have this back and forth with an AI saying, well, I don't understand that term. Could you dive in? Or what's the data that backs it up? Or when did that happen? I mean, just being able to have a continuous, it's what a childlike memory of, or experience of why, digging deeper.
That's exactly what you should do. And get out of the media rut. I know, Peter, you say this a lot. Yeah. But, we have the internet now. You can actually watch useful media like this or study KJ Hardricht and his podcast. He's phenomenal. Watch Lex Friedman, watch Dwarkesh Patel. But while you're doing it, if you don't understand anything, have either Gemini 2.5 Pro or ChatGPT 4 open and just talk to it while you're listening to the podcast. Stay out of the mainstream media. Like, do not listen to the rock stars, sports broadcasting, whatever. It's going to distract you and suck you in. You need that time back and use that time this way. Once you're into it, it's just as much fun, but much more useful. Can
I make a couple of points about that last slide?
Of course.
Let's note that a lot of those roles are being done because people have to do them, not because they want to do them. Right? It's grunt work done repetitively, et cetera, and it's perfect. It's a perfect area. I was really happy to see that a large number of folks, 40% said, I want to take all the repetitive tasks, because nobody wants to be doing that anyway. And now we can automate a lot of that side of it. And just a quick point on the bricklaying thing. I remember showing a drone at Singularity University a few years ago where you had drones working in Cohesion to lay bricks on a wall. And the drones did it in like no time flat because they didn't have, we know exactly where the bricks need to be laid. It's totally prescriptive. Off you go.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. This is a story from The Guardian. Amazon testing humanoid robots to deliver packages. Took them long enough, right? This is, we see in the image here, Agility's Digit robot. I'm going to have the CEO of Agility at the Abundance Summit with their robots. Actually, I'm going to have 4 or 5 robot companies at the Abundance Summit in March this year. You can learn more at abundance360.com.
But I was a little alarmed when you read it's going to spring out of the van. That's going to be a little unnerving when that starts happening. Yeah. My two dogs are already freaked out by the postman. What the hell are they going to do?
I mean, come on, guys. We're going to have autonomous vans driving around where robots do the last 10 meters of delivery to your doorstep, and it's just going to drop the cost of this. So we're going to see, drone delivery of products. We're going to see, autonomous van and robot delivery of products. This is happening. There's no question about it.
It's a when, not an if. Agreed.
Right. And so the question is when. When do you predict, Salim?
I'd say middle of next year, because the technology is all there. They just have to there's probably some regulatory stuff to get through, which might slow it down. But the technology's potential is now there now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the technology is there. I think the humanoids are inspiring everybody. There's no surprise here, but what people don't talk about as much is the robotics that are doing nanosurgery, microsurgery are unbelievable, and also the robots that are crawling through pipes, cleaning things, getting into sewer systems. Those are also taking off. They're not as sexy as the humanoids, but it's all happening concurrently, and it's just tremendous benefit for humanity.
Yeah, I wanted to make a point about humanoid robots. You know, we've had this long, strong discussion.
I'm tired of your point you're making there.
Hold on. I thought of a great real-world example of my octopus idea, which is you've got a human robot. How many times when you're doing something do you wish you had a third arm to hold the garbage bag open or whatever? So can we please have these humanoid robots have 3 arms?
No, we'll just have 2 robots with 4 arms. Anyway, but here's interesting, right? We're going to see these companies stack resources. So, you know, I would not be surprised to see Tesla get into delivery services, right? With autonomous vehicles and Optimus robots. We'll see, obviously, here Amazon and Agility. We'll see other companies coming together on this. But a full stack in the physical world. Let's talk about RoboTaxis. Big news since we spoke last on June 22nd. The Tesla RoboTaxi launched in Austin with a flat fee of $4.20. Elon loves his $4.20 over and over again. So RoboTaxi is now live. Here is Elon at Tesla headquarters in Austin. And here's a quick video of what a fan had as an experience in the RoboTaxi. Thoughts? Finally, he's done it. I mean, I think it's one of the biggest markets, that Tesla is going to experience. We've seen Cathie Wood predict as a multi-trillion-dollar marketplace. Tesla will have been known as a car manufacturer. It will be known as a humanoid robot and autonomous, RoboTaxi service delivery company. Thoughts, gentlemen?
So 2 quick thoughts. One is never bet against Elon. I've learned that to my massive investment portfolio suffering over the last decade. I think the second observation is these cars are technologically quite inferior to the Google Waymo taxis because they don't operate in heavy rain. They're limited by human level sight. And that's a problem, I think, in the long term. He may get some buzz out of it, but he's going to have to upgrade the LiDAR for this to be really workable.
We'll talk about that.
And it could be, hold on, let me just step on the other side of that. He could just be waiting for LiDAR systems and all that to hit the cost curve where it becomes cheap enough, and then you just flip over to that.
Well, you know his thesis, right? If a human driver can drive with just his or her eyes, in fact, with one human eye, then from first principle thinking, an autonomous car should be able to drive with a couple of cameras. And that's his basic thesis.
That's great, except LiDAR can see 5 cars ahead. So
why not give it superhuman skills?
Yeah,
why not give it superhuman?
You could do it. Why not do it? And yes, it's much more expensive for now. I think he went down a philosophical route of going away from LiDAR, and I think I think you end up with an inferior product. But if it's workable and it works well enough, that's fine.
I mean, listen, I drive with my Tesla's autonomous mode all the time, and it does perfect. The only time it ever stops working is when it catches me picking up my phone and looking at it, and it beeps at me. Otherwise, it's extraordinary. In the rain.
That part surprised me, actually. I didn't know, when we were driving together a couple of weeks ago, the inward-facing camera is new to me. It's like actually watching your behavior
it's
and
my
then
behavior.
Adjusting. I was like, wow, that's a little weird.
If I'm looking out the window to the left, it sort of like beeps at me. If I pick up my phone, it beeps at me. It's like really annoying. But
I've kept my 2017 Tesla Model S for exactly that reason. There's no inward camera, so it's great. I've now driven that car, just to flip to the other side of this. I've now driven that car 4 times up and down the country from Miami to New York or Toronto. So I've become a bit of an expert at the highway driving.
Have you heard about airplanes, Salim? Have you heard about this thing called an airplane?
You know what? I load up with 5 of my favorite shawarma kebabs. I arrange 40 conference calls. The car drives itself 80% of the time, and it's free to do that. And I arrive more refreshed than when I left. I mean, it's phenomenal.
All right, let's take a look at this next one. So Tesla faces protests in Austin over Musk's RoboTaxi plans. Protesters claim Tesla's FSD, full self-driving, has been linked to hundreds of crashes, including dozens of fatalities. So let's look at the data here 1 second. Here it is, number of accidents per million miles. And without any question, listen, humans are terrible drivers. We are distracted constantly now with at least one cell phone per car.
We are terrible control systems for 2-ton cars going at high speed.
Yeah.
Can I throw out a quick data point here?
Sure.
About in 2011, I think it was, there was a 3-day outage in BlackBerry services around the world. Nobody could send text messages for 3 days. The accident rate in Abu Dhabi dropped 40% during that 3 days. Okay, that was then. Today, you look at anybody driving, they're looking at their phone. We absolutely should not be driving as human beings.
I agree. I mean, we're going to see an extraordinary increase in safety. I mean, just the idea of a 16 or 17-year-old driving a couple of ton vehicle at 60 miles per hour through the streets with very little experience and their phone distracting them should scare the daylights out of everybody.
Well, this is America's greatest Achilles heel, actually, is that we're responsive to sympathetic stories that are statistically rounding errors. And it's actually
wrong. Or wrong.
Or wrong, yeah. Sometimes, well, look at the State of the Union address. Somewhere along the way, it changed to, let me call out 4 or 5 people in the crowd here and tell their personal stories. You're like, well, how do I know if that's just like, that could be 1 in a trillion for all I know. But yeah, that's okay. I'm just trying to sway a bunch of voters toward what I'm trying to get done here. But we're ridiculously, swayed by that. And if you look at that prior slide, yes, hundreds of fatalities from self-driving. Like, well, hundreds relative to what? Yeah. And, you put your statistician hat on, you're like, this is clearly better. But, some of these are really, really tragic. And if it's all captured on video, which everything is now, it can sway opinion. And this is where, if America is going to lose to China or to some other, state, it's going to be for this reason.
Yeah, it's the same concept when people hear about an airplane accident. Oh my God, I'm fearful of flying. It's like, have you looked at the accident rates in cars? I mean, flying is still the safest mode of transportation.
1.2 million people a year die in car accidents around the world every year.
Yeah.
Well, hey, nuclear power, we'll come to that later, I guess, but that's another case study. I mean,
we will. Point. So here's an important news bite from this past month here in LA. 5 Waymo vehicles were torched in downtown LA. Waymo paused service in LA, limited in San Francisco, Austin, Phoenix, Atlanta. And the question is this the beginning of the Luddite revolt? Right. So are people, people are responding against all of the technology. And here's an image of the Luddite revolution from 8/11 through 8/16. And I have some data I want to share with you guys on this because I think it's worth noting and I want to talk about it. So the Luddite revolt over that 5-year period was a series of protests by English textile workers against the mechanization of the Industrial Revolution, particularly against automated looms that threatened their jobs and wages. Sounds familiar, right? Named after the mythical Ned Luddite, the movement began in Nottingham and spread across the UK. Workers fearing de-skilling and unemployment amid economic hardship from the Napoleonic Wars destroyed machines in organized raids at night. The revolt involved thousands. The British government deployed 12,000 troops to suppress it. Sounds familiar. And here we go. Quote, machine breaking became a capital crime in 1812, leading to 17 executions, dozens of hangings, and the movement was crushed by 1816. Thoughts? Salim.
Well, this is the classic immune system response, right? In a slight twist, I note when I read this up, the Waymo cars were actually called to that spot so they could be attacked. So the AI is watching those people carefully for future retribution. But I think this is the general backlash of technology against society. What we don't understand, we fear, and what we fear, we get angry at, and we try and destroy it.
Yeah, I should insert a picture of the picketers that are in front of OpenAI. The security guys have cleared them all out now, but if you pull one off the internet, it's very Luddite revolt looking.
Yeah, and I think we are without question going to have a revolt. How often and where against which companies? I mean, we haven't really started to see job displacement truly occur, but when it does hit, and I think we'll be seeing it significantly in the next 2 to 3 years until we figure it out on reskilling and other mechanisms.
Can I give the positive spin here?
Of course, we have no more looms.
No, it's the fact that we've seen this kind of displacement fear throughout history, and we always survive it very, very well.
Yes, of course.
One. And on the reskilling, which everybody's like, oh my God, how are we going to reskill? Note that we have AI to help reskill everybody, right? And so you can pick your passion and go, I want to be reskilled in that area, and you'll get a really good potential work. Note also that we're near full employment today and have been for a while, so we actually need a little bit more buffer in the labor market than we have today. So those are my positive spins, and I also understand the negative.
I am curious what rules and regulations the government will put forward. I don't think it will become a capital crime. I do think we'll see troops again deployed on things like this. This was
just arm the Waymo cars with little machine guns so they can defend themselves.
Right? Fight back. This was a scary story. 2 children shot while in a Waymo here in Santa Monica at 2nd and Broadway. This is actually probably a mile from my home. 2 teens were shot in arm and torso, non-life-threatening, now stable in hospitals. I think violence against tech, I don't know if you remember all of the scooters here in Santa Monica, Salim, if you were here at that time. And the scooters, people sort of raged against the scooters because they were blocking sidewalks. They would literally throw them into the middle of the street. They decapitate them. I think we're going to see, when we see Waymo robots, or not Waymo robots, when we see Optimus robots and Figure robots on the streets, I think we're going to find them in various positions hanging from trees. Thoughts here?
We are, but I think this is really just part of the shift. I mean, they probably called the Waymo to try and get away, and there was probably some sort of gang violence involved in this, something like this.
Yeah. Okay, this was the slide about Waymo versus Tesla. And here's a tweet. The downfall of Waymo began yesterday. This was tweeted on June 23rd about the launch of Elon's RoboTaxi. So people need to understand the Waymo car is not cheap. It's a $200,000 vehicle. It's got 29 cameras, 5 LiDARs, 6 radars. Versus the RoboTaxi, and Elon has held to his first principle thinking, there shall only be cameras.
But this would be a great Dave Salim bet. Dave, do you have a particular preference on which one would win out in this?
Yeah, Peter, you know this topic far, far better than I do. My bet, knowing what I know, is that it'll be about a 70-30 split. There's always 2 or 3 vendors in any given market in the US. It always stabilizes at that for antitrust reasons. Tesla will grab the lead now because they put a bigger investment into the neural chips. On the other hand, Google's got incredible technology. But if I had to bet right now, I'd say 70% of the market goes to Tesla, 30% goes to Waymo. It stabilizes.
So I'm 50-50 because I always prefer better technology. But you have the never bet against Elon problem on the other side.
Here's the issue. It's a huge capital expense that Waymo will need to roll out to do this nationwide. Elon's got a different option. You buy a Model Y, you turn on self-driving, it drives you around, you're going on vacation for a week, you tell your car to go off and earn your revenue. So basically the CapEx is covered by the consumer, and it becomes a revenue engine for you. So you'll buy a couple of these and just have them go out there. So he's going to populate millions of these cars across the country at no CapEx to himself.
So if you apply that model, which is essentially the EXO model, which is assets on demand, and you don't own your own assets, and you let other people self-provision these assets, etc., that will win hands down, because it'll scale much, much faster than Waymo trying to own its own cars, which it has to.
Yeah, this is directly connected to our other side bet, which is, you remember last week, Elon and Trump finally break up. Now they'll hate each other forever. I was like, no. One, this might be totally made up. They might be just trying to make PR for themselves. Wouldn't surprise me at all. But 2, if it is real, which it probably is, they'll kiss and make up in no time. That was my bet.
Yeah, by the way, we'll have Anthony Scaramucci is going to join us back on this pod to talk about how the administration...
He was eerily accurate last time when after inauguration, we asked him how long will this bromance last? And he said, I think 30 Scaramucci's or something like that. And it was really near dead on, almost to the day. So we got to respect his views next time.
Yeah. Well, look, the government needs space launches and Elon needs regulatory approval of that really good idea. You know, you buy your car and then you lease it back to be a RoboTaxi. It's just a really good idea.
Let's hit a couple other quick ones. This is flying cars and drones. We've seen the Trump sign an executive order on drones and flying cars and supersonics. Really important for these drone systems to actually work. You need to enable beyond visual line of sight mode. And we're seeing the U.S. government support 5 regional eVTOL pilot programs. Super excited about Archer Aviation here in L.A. to serve the Olympics in 2028. And the other point here is they're enabling supersonic travel by scrapping outdated overflight bans. So, you know, the supersonic jets of the Concorde could not fly over the domestic U.S. because of the sonic boom, and providing FAA waivers, in particular because a number of companies have come up with mechanisms to actually avoid or absorb the sonic boom. But this is going to accelerate aviation as it should. I mean, there hasn't been that much change in aviation for the last 50 years. It's been incredibly slow.
Yeah, I was wondering if all the privatization of space travel was also going to lead to breakthroughs for out of the atmosphere hypersonic travel, because I don't know if you remember Steve Keeshy was working on that.
Yeah, I know way too much about this. It's just really tough. I mean, the amount of energy and to build something that's going to go skip across the upper atmosphere, and there have been many companies who have died on that mission statement, and billions invested. The closest thing right now is Starship going spaceport to spaceport, but it's still expensive. Here, another competitor we know about 3 or 4 of the companies out there providing eVTOL services. This is Wisk. It's been selected by Miami to launch in that location. So watching out for Wisk in Miami. I don't know if we want to talk about these eVTOL flying cars at all, Salim, but they're coming. Interesting, Dave, when we spoke to Eric Schmidt about this, he was not a believer in eVTOLs.
Yeah. So, I think it was a relative thing. There's so much change going on and so much of it is so impactful. And I don't think it was like, I don't believe in this. It was like, look, aviation, we have helicopters. Now we're going to have, 4-prop electronic versions of them. So what? Like, well, the so what to me is that they're self-flying, self-driving. That to me is really, really a big deal. And they're much safer too. So I do think it is a big deal, but he's like, but relative to space and AI, is it a big deal? And he was like, nah, not really.
For me, this is one of the most exciting technologies we could have. Okay, can I explain why?
Sure, but you're still driving your Tesla every place.
I am, but I just love it. That's fine. I'm allowed to do that. By the way, I have a Porsche Macan electric also, and it's like maybe the best car I've ever driven, but it's not way, way better than my 2017 Model S. It's marginally better. So that's really profound to say how much further ahead Tesla was than all the other car makers in many, many areas. But let me go back to eVTOLs for a second, okay? Yeah. I think this totally changes the game. Why? Because real estate that's hard to get to is priced very low. Yeah. And it's scarce. And therefore, we pay a lot of money for that little waterfront property on a lake somewhere because there's not that many of them. Well, now you can get to all sorts of places you can't get to by road. It's going to make an abundance of or a really beautiful plot high up on a mountainside that you can't get to by car. Now that becomes a viable real estate, and we turn real estate from a scarcity problem into an abundance problem. And I think that's incredibly exciting for the future. There's huge economic implications for this, not just to mention many of us fly around a lot, and how much of a nightmare is the damn commute into the city. And just having a drone corridor from Kennedy Airport into Manhattan would just change the game.
Yeah, for sure. And that is coming. We've seen this with Joby, with Archer, now with Whisk. You're going to get commute from downtown Manhattan to JFK in one of these vehicles. Right.
Yeah. In Sao Paulo, it's 2 hours to get to the airport.
Oh my God. Sao Paulo, helicopters are the only option you have if you've got
and
the
those
money.
are like not the safest. So these are safe and solid, and I think they start become really a big deal. Tourism destinations. I mean, the list just goes on of the broad effects this can have. This is hugely exciting to me.
Yeah.
Every day I get the strangest compliment. Someone will stop me and say, "Peter, you have such nice skin." Honestly, I never thought I'd hear that from anyone. And honestly, I can't take the full credit. All I do is use something called OneSkin OS1 twice a day, every day. The company is built by 4 brilliant PhD women who've identified a peptide that effectively reverses the age of your skin. I love it. And again, I use this twice a day, every day. You can go to oneskin.co and write Peter at checkout for a discount on the same product I use. That's oneskin.co and use the code Peter at checkout. All right, back to the episode.
I want to jump into the next subject, which is timely and critical, which is the demand for energy from AI systems, and a little bit of a look at US versus China. I think people need to understand we are going to become limited by power in our quest for digital superintelligence. So how are we going to power this revolution? So China is rapidly scaling up on nuclear. It's their equivalent of a Sputnik moment. So China aims to surpass the US by 2030 in nuclear. I mean, the numbers are staggeringly, incredibly, pessimistic here. The US only added 2 reactors this century. I mean, 2 reactors, over the last 25 years, 94 total in the US versus China's 58. China is building a reactor every 52 months. The US licensing alone takes 10 to 12 years.
Yep.
Crazy.
Yeah. This is the reason I love doing this podcast. And I look forward to this so much because your team will dig up a topic that I really need to study. And then it'll come into the deck and I'll be like, yeah, it's just so fascinating to me to dig in on these things. And it's just so fun to talk about it. A lot of these things, this are so obvious. And this is America's Achilles heel. Like, we cannot act on long-term thinking and long-term investing. Our investment cycle is 3, 4, 5 years at the most. Our election cycle is 8 years, 4 years or 8 years. And we can't think about 10 years in the future. And so it's killing us. It's absolutely killing us. But God, the data in these next couple of slides is mind-blowing. We're
going to talk about nuclear in a future podcast with some of the CEOs in these industries. But, Generation 1 nuclear power plants no longer exist. Generation 2 plants are still out there, including what we saw with Fukushima and 3 Mile Island. Those were the dangerous plants. Generation 3 have been the plants that have been really manufactured over the last 30 years. And then Generation 4 are the plants that are currently have been designed, are fail-safe. It's kind of nuclear plant I'd put in my backyard. But the time frame for these plants, for developing them, is insanely long, right? We're talking if you wanted to start today, it would take you 10, 15 years. And that's why 3 Mile Island is being recommissioned, because it's already approved from a government regulatory standpoint. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm. It is totally crazy.
Salim?
I'm really, really angry about this one. I'm trying to be constructive here, but we know that solar scales. China's going to have more solar than the entire U.S.
That's our next topic here. Let's go to the next slide.
Wait, Salim,
you got muted here.
You muted yourself. I don't know if you muted yourself or we muted you.
I'm just really mad.
I
was going to swear and I thought I better cut off the mic before I swear.
All right, so I'll let you take the lead here. China is winning the race to become a Type 1 civilization. In other words, a civilization that harnesses all the power hitting the Earth and the sun. By 2030, China will have the ability to build an entire U.S. worth of power generation from solar and storage alone every single year. Look at this chart. Salim, talk to us about this.
You go, Dave. Let me just gather myself.
No, this chart is. I added the gigawatt axis on the left there because who the hell talks about terawatt hours per month? What the hell is that metric? But anyway, gigawatts is a better way to look at it. But this is actually gigawatt actual utilization. They actually created about 700 gigawatts of solar panels last year, 2024. And deployed 250 gigawatts of peak capacity.
I mean,
so on this chart, it shows up
after the hillsides covered with solar. We covered that on a past podcast. It's insane. They're just rolling this out, building capacity and distribution.
Yeah. I mean, just for context, the U.S. total capacity energy production is 1.2 terawatts, so 1,200 gigawatts. And so, peak actual utilization is more like, 3/4 of a terawatt. So you're like, half of what the U.S. creates, they created in solar panels in 2024 alone. Just solar panels in 2024.
Yeah. Salim.
All right, so they have an advantage because they've got all the rare earths and they can use those for solar panels and build out. They're going to add more solar than the entire U.S. energy output in a little while, so that's going to be crazy. It blows my mind that we are putting restrictions and not extending tax credits for solar and other stuff here in this country. We need to unlock that in the biggest possible way and let private sector go nuts on this and put government subsidies there instead of government subsidies on oil, which is what we do today. It's the stupidest energy policy we could possibly have.
I mean, I'm fine with all energy needs to be made available, but where do we invest on growth? Solar is available today. The numbers are, can I just share a couple of points here? There's enough energy that hits the earth in 1 hour to provide the global energy needs of the entire year. So 1 year worth of sun hitting the earth provides global needs for the entire year.
All
right, so here are some additional numbers. Global solar capacity reached 1,300 gigawatts by 2024. About 1% of global energy need is being provided by solar. It's estimated that if you cover just 0.1% of the Earth, about 150,000 kilometers, with 20% efficient panels, that would generate 200,000 terawatt hours annually, exceeding current demands. So how big is 150,000 square kilometers? It's about the size of South Dakota. I've never been to South Dakota, but if it were covered by solar panels, it'd be giving us a huge amount of energy. So
yeah, the problem with solar for data centers and AI fundamentally is the good thing about AI is you can move it to the power. You can take the data center. Yeah. That's a huge advantage. The bad thing is you need those chips to be running 24/7. They depreciate really, really quickly. They're very expensive. The chips cost 10 times more than the power. You're not going to let them sit idle if it's raining out. No. So solar has the horrible flaw of being intermittent. And so it's really good if you can store it. But the cost of lithium to store the solar when it's cloudy and raining is about 5 times higher than the cost of the solar panels. So if you want to become the world's first trillionaire, find a way to store huge amounts of energy cheaper.
Yeah, there is a way, and we're going to be talking to Bill Gross, the CEO of Idealab, right? And he's been using gravitational storage, which is, we'll talk about that, rather than storing into batteries, you use the energy during the day, a portion of energy, to move a large weight vertically. And this has been done with water for ages. But you move a large weight vertically, and then at night the weight gets pulled down by gravity, and in a generator generates electricity. So it's efficient, it's available, and it works.
Can I throw out some thoughts here?
Sure.
So in 2016, we crossed an inflection point where it became cheaper to build a solar power generation facility than fossil fuel. And almost all energy generation since then has been solar because of that. In 2019, we hit a more important inflection point, which is that it became cheaper to build solar than to build and run solar than it was it became cheaper to build and run a solar facility than just run a fossil fuel facility. So the CapEx and OpEx of solar are now cheaper than the OpEx of fossil fuels. Right? That's a crazy inflection point, meaning we don't ever need to build a fossil fuel thing again. We should just be building solar. The utility storage problem has been solved at scale, as you've said. At large scale, this is very easy. You just pump water up a hill to an artificial lake and use hydro at night on the way down, right? It's a little clunky, but it's very workable until battery technology or energy vault type stuff that Bill Gross is doing comes along. So this is really a known problem. We should be going full out for this. I think it was 100 miles by 100 miles to power the whole of the US was Elon's calculation. The one I saw was 2% of the Sahara covered with solar panels gives you enough power to cover the whole world's energy needs. Distribution is a challenge, but just that visual is a really killer visual. Well, it's absurd that we're doing what we're doing.
Here's the chart Elon that was posted. Elon's tweet is solar is 100% of energy long term. Right? No question, this is what's going to drive humanity forward. And here's a chart that basically reads, it took 8 years for solar to go from 100 terawatt hours to 1,000 terawatt hours, and then just 3 years to go from 1,000 to 2,000 terawatt hours. You can see that super exponential growth curve, exceeding hydro, coal, gas, nuclear, wind. Yeah, pretty amazing.
Yeah, I really feel like pumped hydro is very, very efficient, but you need about a lake the size of Loch Ness to move up about 300 meters and come back down to store enough energy to power a huge data center. So that's a lot of water.
Bill Gross has solved that, right? With these gravitational towers, basically you pump huge, multi-ton bags of dirt up into like an elevator shaft into a large building, or up the hillside if you're near a mountain.
Right.
And he's got this working today. He's got huge contracts. We'll be talking to him about that. I think storage can be solved. And I'm hoping, in fact, AI is going to help us with new technology for
yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. If you're a materials scientist or a chemical engineer, I'm pretty sure with AI's help in a couple of years, or maybe even this year, come up with a reversible chemical reaction that's completely self-contained, that stores huge amounts of energy. Use the solar to drive the reaction one way, and then when it's cloudy, run the reaction the opposite direction. Yeah. And if you come up with something that's 10, 20 times more energy dense than a lithium battery, which seems very viable, you're going to be a trillionaire. Yeah. So just figure that out. Use AI to help.
A couple of years ago, we tried to design an X Prize around this, and the numbers were get off-grid storage 50 times cheaper than it is today, which is very viable.
Here's another tweet from Elon. Solar power in China will exceed all sources of electricity combined in the U.S. in 3 to 4 years. It's a wake-up call. China is going all in on energy production, and it's epic.
I have one more thing to say about that. I have one more thing to say about this.
Please.
I think this China-U.S. stuff is a little overhyped. I don't think we'll have that much of a.
I think it's a stocking. I think it's a stocking.
But I think it's a great. Yeah, I agree. But it's a great comparator. Yeah. I don't think there's real deep conflict there.
No, there's not. There's just. But what it does is it shows the U.S. what is possible.
Yeah, and to Dave's earlier point is this is a structural issue we have in the U.S. where we have 4-year election cycles, and we have no mechanism to look out 20 years and say this is the water, healthcare, energy we need over a 20 year period. We need to solve that structural issue.
And running our venture funds, this acutely. But you make an investment, investors want to see liquidity, within 4 or 5 years. They don't want their money to be sitting out there for 10 or 15 years. In China, they know they'll still be in power. They think they'll still be in power 20 years from now. If you look at the date, they said, we need to be the world's biggest manufacturer of solar panels. So it's about 2004 or 10 or somewhere around there. From that date to you have the factories up and running and you have the production. And then also, when there's a recession, you got to keep cranking. So just keep the engine running because, you've got a 20-year view, 30-year view.
Yeah.
We just can't do that structurally in the U.S. And that's why we get so far behind in nuclear and solar and some of the other long-term trends. And that is our fundamental Achilles heel.
Hey folks, Salim here. Hope you're enjoying these podcasts, and this one in particular was amazing. If you want to hear more from me or get involved in our EXO ecosystem, on the 23rd of July, we're doing a once-a-month workshop. Tickets are $100. We limit it to a few people to make sure it's intimate and proper, and we go through the EXO model. What we do there is we basically show you how to take your organization and turn it into one of these hyper growth AI type companies. And we've done this now for 10 years with thousands of companies. Many of these use the model that we have called the exponential organizations model. Peter and I co-authored the second edition a couple of years ago. So it's $100, July 23rd. Come along. It's the best $100 you'll spend. Link is below. See you there.
All right, last subject for us, gentlemen, crypto. Always have to have a little crypto in the conversation. We've seen Bitcoin over the last couple of weeks dip down below 100K and resurrect itself up to 107. Predictions, Salim, that I'm seeing still hold that we might see 200K by the end of this year. I still remain all in and massively enthusiastic. Are you?
Big time. I heard Michael Saylor say Bitcoin will get to 21 million a Bitcoin. I'll be happy when it gets to 1 million a Bitcoin. That'll be perfectly good enough, I think, for most people, because that'll just put it at the level of gold, which is infinitesimal anyway, as in terms of global asset class. But I think there's a bunch of things happening that are making this move very huge, that'll start to accelerate this. I heard Freddie Mae and Fannie Mac are looking at or approving mortgages backed by Bitcoin. That'll be a huge thing.
Love it.
So it's starting to get systemic approval, and then things go crazy.
Yeah, for sure. I love this. This comes from our friend Brian Armstrong at Coinbase. Earn up to 4% Bitcoin back on every purchase with a new Coinbase One card. I love this. I'm going to switch over from my Amex to this. How about you?
Big time.
Yeah. Dave, thoughts?
I'm really excited about the next story, actually.
All right. Well, let's go to the next story here.
Dave's holding his powder.
Okay.
Yes.
Circle Internet Group goes public and explodes, goes exponential.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, so two parts of this story. One of them is Jeremy Allaire, who's stuck with this for so many years, and he deserves every bit of his success for just grinding it out. You know, it's always tough to be an entrepreneur. He had to grind it out over a long period of time with regulators all over him, and different administrations and people going to jail, and like, what a persistent story. But anyway, the reason this is so important is because agent-to-agent transactions can be done in either Bitcoin or dollars now. Oh, and you can move back and forth seamlessly. The old method, the SWIFT network, the interbank trading network, is great if you're trying to move $1 million to Hong Kong because it's only like $1. Terrible if you're trying to do a penny microtransaction with another AI agent.
Crazy.
So this solves that problem. And because the current pricing model on AI is subscription fees. Give me $200 a month or $20 a month flat. But that's crazy, right? The utilization gets throttled because, if you're trying to write code or talk to your AI, it'll slow down every now and then. Why is that? Because there are too many users online. Like, well, why can't I just pay for what I use as I go? And well, it's because we didn't have Circle. So the whole AI economy needs to now move to these micropayments, and this is what's going to enable it. And that's why the stock is up so much.
Yeah, I've been texting with Jeremy, super impressed, congratulating him on this exponential growth. The IPO goes out at $31 a share and peaks at $300 a share. Extraordinary, right? These are the IPOs that the entrepreneurial market needs to fuel sort of the opening of the doors wide open. Salim, thoughts?
I want to just echo the kudos here for a slightly different reason, which is one of the big issues in the crypto world has been trust. And you have a lot of scam artists and a lot of shucksters, and can you actually deliver trust? And Jeremy, over a long period of time, has demonstrated rock solid, stable, trustworthy environment, and that's not been easy to do in the environment where everybody else is a shuckster.
And in the United States,
and so huge kudos to that.
Within the U.S., territory of law, if you would, which is super important. So, Circle Internet Group is a financial technology founded in 2013. It's a stable coin pegged 1-to-1 for the US dollar. And it's going to enable, as you said, Dave, my AI agents to go and transact microtransactions. And it's finally going to enable what has been the full promise of the internet. Not just data, not just video, not just words, but a financial layer. And I can't wait.
Can I say one thing about stablecoins?
Yeah, sure.
It's awesome to have this pegged against the dollar, But once you have something, there's so many natural assets in the ground and out in the world.
Oh, amazing.
That when
yes.
you can peg a stable coin against, say, real estate holdings or something like that, and when that becomes possible, as long as the trust, again, needs to be there, you're going to unlock unbelievable amounts of capital flow.
One of my friends is actually contracted, I can't say the details here, with a government who has large gold deposits underground, and they've gotten a contract where they're going to peg a token against the gold in the ground and not dig it out, wait until the technology for being able to extract it more environmentally friendly is there. But, that's an extraordinary thought that there's so many assets that could be sort of connected to a token or a stable token.
Yeah, it's the missing ingredient, actually, and kind of the trifecta of digital transactions, because Bitcoin has become a great store of wealth, but it's, there's no guarantee that it's stable. The dollar is guaranteed to go down in value, right? We just print more dollars every year. So you don't want to have a huge balance sitting in Circle for a long period of time. So what people will tend to do is park their money in Bitcoin. Then if they want to transact in dollars, move it over to Circle. It's all seamless. Do your microtransactions in Circle and then come back to Bitcoin. But what if you want something tied to something incredibly stable, like real estate or gold or whatever? Well, it doesn't exist yet. Exactly. So that would be the trifecta of the crypto circle.
All right, Moonshot mates, what an extraordinary couple of weeks since we spoke last. There's so many other stories I can't wait to cover with you guys in the next week or two ahead. Any travels coming up for you guys? Salim, are you orbiting the planet again?
I just came back from a 100th birthday party of a grandparent, one of Lily's grandmothers, which was unbelievable. Not going anywhere for a bit. I think I'll be seeing you soon, Peter, at the end of July in Utah, maybe. So we'll talk about that separately.
That's great. Yeah. Dave, how about you?
Yeah, we're going back to see Kevin Weil very soon in San Francisco. Hopefully, the sooner the better, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. And then
at OpenAI headquarters, right?
Mega event, OpenAI headquarters. Our mega event on September 9th, Google agreed to host the pre-party at their HQ. So that's going to be. So I'm basically going to be going back to San Fran over, and that's why I need that hypersonic plane. I just want to get back and forth a lot. So.
All right, dear Moonshot mates, have a fantastic weekend and excited for next week. See you guys soon.
Great conversation, guys. Really awesome.
Fun.
If you could have had a 10-year head start on the dot-com boom back in the 2000s, would you have taken it? Every week, I track the major tech metatrends. These are massive, game-changing shifts that will play out over the decade ahead. From humanoid robotics to AGI, quantum computing, energy breakthroughs, and longevity. I cut through the noise and deliver only what matters to our lives and our careers. I send out a Metatrend newsletter twice a week as a quick 2-minute read over email. It's entirely free. These insights are read by founders, CEOs, and investors behind some of the world's most disruptive companies. Why? Because acting early is everything. This is for you if you want to see the future before it arrives and profit from it. Sign up at Diamandis.com/Metatrends and be ahead of the next tech bubble. That's Diamandis.com/Metatrends.